Welcome to the Jersey Score, the channel where lately we've been talking a lot about college football realignment. And so if you're interested in that, please, after watching this video, go check out some of those videos. But normally, as our name would suggest, we talk a lot about sports uniforms and logos. And so today we are getting back to that and continuing a series that we've been doing, ranking each college conference by football uniform. And we've been starting with the P5 conferences with Big 12, Pac 12, and the SEC. And today we're continuing that with the ACC. We also have Big 10 in the queue, so be sure to like and subscribe, and then you'll see that video when it comes out. It also helps our channel quite a bit, so it's a win-win. So before we get started, let's lay out a few ground rules. So teams nowadays have so many different alternate looks and color combinations that I've really tried to focus in on just their primary home and away looks, and I'm looking at uniform design, color scheme, their helmets, the logo on their helmet, and even their team nickname. There's a lot of very solid looks in the conference, which has not always been the case. When I think of ACC, I think of a lot of boring looks, but a lot of teams over recent years have updated their uniforms and made this a pretty close race. So now that we got all that out of the way, let's start with our list. At number 14, we have NC State. And now these are just a mess for me, starting with primarily the design on the shoulder pads, which I'm guessing is supposed to represent wolf scratches or something. And for me, this just doesn't work. It makes the whole thing very busy and cluttered. It's a weird design. And other than that, the uniforms are pretty good. I'm one that loves the sailor hat wolf logo. I just think it's too big on the helmet as well. And so this is really an example of Adidas trying to do something unique and cool and it really going very, very wrong, which is the same thing as the next team on our list. At number 13, we have Louisville. Now, when I first saw these, I thought it was an alternate uniform, and I thought, okay, this is all right. And then I kept seeing it and realized, no, this is their football uniform. And much like NC State, they have a lot going on the shoulder blades that makes it feel a little bit cluttered, and I don't like that shiny pattern. But at least this is coherent. It's clear that these are feathers, they're cardinals, it makes sense. The deep drop shadow on the name and the numbers for me gives it a comic booky feel, and then their logo, which I like, isn't even portrayed how it's normally portrayed on its helmet. It's just a white outline instead. So again, I think these work as an alternate, but as their primary uniform, I think this is a fail. At number 12, we have Wake Forest. Now, there's nothing really egregious with these uniforms other than the horrendous Nike collar, that thick collar that they do. And if you've watched any of my other videos on these, you've heard me harp on this before. But other than that, the look is just kind of boring. Whereas I look at Vanderbilt, who has a similar color scheme and recently came out with a redesign. Before, they were pretty boring as well. But look at this. This is an example of how to do something new and fresh, but still being very clean and classic. And so I think Vanderbilt nails it, and Wake could probably take a page out of their book. At number 11, we have Virginia Tech. Now, I hate putting Tech this low because I really love their color scheme, and for the most part, these uniforms work for me. They're pretty clean, but it's just that big V collar and those weird stripes on the shoulder pads that ruin it for me and give their uniform kind of a hokey feel. Yes, pun intended. But if Tech were to go full-time to these Michael Vick throwback uniforms, for me, they'd probably be number one in the conference. At number 10, we have Syracuse. Now, this is a great uniform, has some very nice classic elements to it. I love the stripe pattern and the classic font for the numbers. But Syracuse, much like Virginia Tech, could benefit a lot from just a couple small tweaks to the uniforms that would really launch it right up the rankings. Now, with such bold colors, I think they got to be careful that they don't get too overwhelming, and so they need to keep things simplified. If we look at Illinois, who has a similar color scheme, you notice that there's not nearly as much going on with it. So I think Syracuse, I like their uniform, I think, better, but they would benefit from simplifying just a little bit. Again, it's getting rid of that collar, not just because I hate it, but because that adds more color to it. So just simplify a little bit and then remove the numbers from the shoulder pads, and that just cleans up the whole look. And I think right there you have a uniform that's probably top 5 on my list in the conference, if not top 3. At number 9, we have Georgia Tech. Now, I had heard that the Yellow Jackets were going to move away from the triple option in favor of a more watchable brand of football, but I had no idea they were getting the uniforms to go along with it. Now, I really like these. My only complaint is the shiny stripes and numbering. If you make that a little more matted, I would think it would be even better, but it doesn't matter because these are by far way superior to any other uniforms I've ever seen Georgia Tech wear. At number 8, we have Florida State. Now, I know I'm going to get pushback for this one. I know the Seminoles look is very popular. I saw their helmet just won a poll on a bracket on, I think it was CFB Home on Twitter. I really like it. I think I liked their previous uniform. I just felt like it was a little busy, and they took the same elements of that and kept it and just simplified it. So I would say these are even better. But really, we're at the point in the conference where all the uniforms are pretty even. So at this point, it's maybe minor differences that make them stand apart. And it really just comes down to preference at this point. So I think this is a really solid look. I don't really have any complaints on it. Just there's others that I just kind of like better. At number 7, we have Miami. Now, this is another uniform that I really like. I love the color scheme. The look is very clean and it's very classic. I really love that they've been able to stay true to those looks from the 80s from over the years. The only thing that's really different on here is the font for the numbers, and even the font I don't mind. And so I hope they continue to stay with that classic look and not change. At number 6, we have UVA. Now, the Who's have traditionally had some pretty boring, if not outright horrendous looks. But when they hired Bronco Mendenhall, he came in and he changed up their uniforms to these bad boys, and I really like them. What's funny is he did the same thing when he went to BYU. He changed up the look to this basic design, not the royal blues. But that's a story for another day. So both those teams really owe him for their nice-looking threads. And so I love UVA's look. It might seem odd to have them ahead of Miami and FSU. Call me biased, but I'm just partial to it. At number 5, we have Duke. And talk about a clean look. I mean, these are so clean. They are essentially a ripoff of one of my favorite looks in all of the NFL, the Indianapolis Colts. So it seems like I love the Colts so much, and Duke essentially the same thing. I should have them ranked higher on my list. But for some reason, they're just not as high. I blame it on these blue helmets with the black logo, but also it could just be that I'm biased against the Blue Devils. But nonetheless, it's a very, very good look. At number 4, we have UNC. Now, I know this is another team that people love to hate, but you've got to love the powder blues. And it's not just the color, they pull it off really well. They do have the Argyle, which I've always thought was a really odd thing to have on sports uniforms, but I think they incorporate it really well into the uniform, and it's so iconic and part of their brand. And one of the things that I think they do best is, it's talking about the Argyle, is the symmetry from their basketball uniforms to their football uniforms. And I think they do it very well, very seamlessly, that you have that cohesive look across sports teams. And you think, well, yeah, that's probably pretty easy. But look at Kansas. A basketball blue blood, and look what their football uniforms were for so long. So it's not always as easy as you'd think, and I think UNC does it really well. At number 3, we have Boston College. And yes, this surprised me too. I just think that this look is so clean and it's so fresh while still incorporating those classic elements. Now, it could be a little bit due to the newness factor that I haven't really seen these uniforms, and I haven't watched them in action, certainly, because I don't watch very many Boston College games. But, maybe as I've see these more and I get used to them, that they drop back down to kind of more of the middle of the pack. But while they're still new, I really like these. At number 2, we have Pitt. Now, this is a look that I really love. I remember for a long time, Pitt had that darker gold and dark blue colors, and was just very drab, and they've exchanged them for this brighter blue and yellow combo. And they've kept the uniforms really clean, and even the numbers with that Gothic feel, I think, really match that Pittsburgh feel and brand. And you gotta love the cursive font logo on the helmet. The only knock on these uniforms, which I didn't even realize until I was putting this video together, is that on the numbers and on the stripes, they have this weird pattern in it. I would just go for a solid color in there. I don't know what that's about, but since you can't really see it, it doesn't detract too much for me, and these, I think, deserve to be at number 2. And so, yes, that means that Clemson is number 1. And I know people are tired of Clemson being at the top of the conference, but what can I say? This is just a classic look that has aged really well, and it's one that I've liked a long time, since even before they started winning the national championships. I've on record as saying that orange is a hard color to pull off, but this softer shade of orange and coupled with that shade of purple, I think really works. And they do a good job to use the purple sparingly, so it's not overpowering with the two bright colors. And these are just, it's a classic look with that classic stripe piping on the pants as well as on the helmet. And their logo is just really cool. The paw print, it's simple, but it's unique, and it just screams Clemson. So these, I think, deserve every bit of being at number 1 at the top of the conference. And because I am a homer and I love BYU's uniforms, I always like to see how I think they would stack up in a given conference. And I think in this case, we look at Keaton Slovis. I think he made an upgrade this past offseason from one set of blue uniforms that I really like to another. And I think BYU's right up there with Clemson, but I think Clemson does edge them out because they have a more unique color scheme. And we forgot to point out, but it should be obvious, that we did not include Notre Dame on this list because they are independent in football, and we'll do an independent video as well. But that is our list of the ACC rankings by football uniform. Let us know what your rankings would be in the comments. And please like the video and subscribe, and you can catch as more content as we do the other conferences and see those. And also, if you're into college football realignment, we'll do plenty of videos on that. So we really appreciate your support, and we'll see you next time.